All right, guys, welcome back. We are going to do the last section in chapter 5, which means that your test is coming up soon. So make sure you're checking on Canvas to get the test review and any extra credit that you want to do on there as well. All right, so we're going to get started using the theorems from the last few sections, which remember, let's go ahead and list those off actually. We had side, 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 angle, side, hypotenuse, leg, angle, side, angle, and then angle, angle, side. By the way, these questions, or I'm sorry, these 5 shortcuts are going to be on your test. I will ask you to list all of them. So make sure that you are working on memorizing those. Okay, so on the warm-up, we're going to use these 5 shortcuts. So make sure that you have these handy and that you can recall them as we're working. All right, so the first 3 problems at the top here, it says we need to determine if the triangles are congruent. And if they are, then you're going to state how you know. So on number 1, I noticed that I have a right angle right here. And of course, I have a linear pair at the bottom. So that means that this angle over here is also a right angle. So just to kind of remind you, anytime you have a right angle, you have a right triangle, right? And one of these specifically is used for right triangles. That is the hypotenuse leg. So right triangles are going to use the hypotenuse leg the most. So whenever you see a right angle, you want to make sure that you think about if you're going to need to use hypotenuse leg. So on this example, we have the hypotenuse right here, and we have the hypotenuse over here also marked. So we have the first part done. Now we need to find a leg that is the same. So this segment right here that they share, I can mark them congruent. And so that is going to be my leg. So I'm going to say, yes, these are congruent by the hypotenuse leg theorem because the left triangle has hypotenuse and leg, and so does the right triangle. All right, number 2, I see that I have a side right here and I have an angle here. And then I see that they're sharing this side here. So I'm going to mark that as a side as well. And so if you'll go through and use S for side and A for angle, you'll see that this is a lot more clear. So if you go in order, side, then angle, then side. So yes, by side, angle, side. All right, number 3. Again, I'm going to label A for angle, and then they share a side right here. So this one is angle, angle, side. All right, moving on to the second set of problems here. It says to state what additional information is needed in order to show that the triangles are congruent for the given reason. So on number 4, they want us to use side, side, side. And if you look at the 2 triangles, we have side, side. So of course, if we're going to use side, 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 we need all 3 sides congruent to the other 3 sides. And so this segment right here and this segment down here have to be congruent if we're going to use side, side, side. So what's missing? What information do we need? Well, we need GE to be congruent to segment XZ. Okay, that would be the missing information. All right, on number 5, they want us to use angle, side, angle. I'm going to go ahead and label these with an A. And so, of course, if I'm going to use angle, side, angle, I'm missing the side in between the 2 angles. I'm going to use a different color here. So the side in between the 2 angles would be right here. Okay, so make sure that it does go in order. We would need these sides to be the same. And so IH is congruent to ST. That would be the piece of missing information. All right, so we've been talking about these 5 different congruence theorems, and these 5 things here are nice because they're a shortcut to showing that the triangles are congruent. If you remember when we very first started this chapter, we were talking about how in congruent triangles, you would have to have every single piece the same. So we were talking about in the very beginning of the chapter that if triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF, it means that angle A is congruent to angle D. It means that B is congruent to E, and that C is congruent to F. It also means that segment AB and DE are the same BC and EF, and then also AC and DF. So we had 6 pieces at the very beginning of this chapter that we had to show congruent on the first triangle and the second triangle. So it was 6 parts on one and 6 parts on another. And so that was a lot. And so we were excited that we had these 5 congruence theorems because that was a shortcut. We no longer had to show all 6 parts, 3 angles, 3 sides. We just had to do maybe side, 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 or side, angle, side. We just had to do little pieces of the triangle. So once we used one of these 5, then we were able to show that the triangles were congruent. And if the triangles are congruent, we can assume everything else is the same, right? So if we had side, 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 for example, the triangles are now congruent by side, 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 well, then you can assume the angles are also the same, right? So that's what we're going to talk about today. So it says using congruent triangles. So again, if the triangles are congruent, we're going to use that idea to show even more pieces are congruent than were marked originally. So we're going to have a new acronym today. This will be on your test. It says CPCTC. Every other letter is a C. And it says corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So what this means is the parts in one triangle have to kind of correspond or be in the same position as the part in the other triangle. So let's say I was using side, side, side for these 2 triangles, and I wanted to show that maybe angle A is congruent to angle D. Well, I would first have to say the 2 triangles are congruent by side, side, side. But then I could show corresponding parts, so a part in the same position, this one here and maybe this one here, are congruent because the triangles are congruent. So instead of having to explain that every time, like, okay, all of the parts in this triangle are congruent to the parts in this triangle, which means that this part is congruent to this part because the triangles are congruent. Like, you don't have to explain all that. You can just simply say CPCTC. Okay, so we're going to use that on the next several examples. All right, so on this example, it says, is triangle ABC congruent to triangle DEF? So first thing we're going to do, obviously, is check that the triangle letters ABC are in order. So A down to B across to C, and then they said D to E up to F. So those look good. I'm kind of looking at the little marks here and making sure that when we go over them, it's in the right order, and they were. All right, so I'm going to say next, I would probably go through and mark these with A for angle and S for side. And I'm seeing angle, angle, side. So I'm going to say, yes, they're congruent by angle, angle, side. And then it says, so what else is congruent, right? What else? So in this picture, we only had 3 things marked, but could we mark some other stuff? Well, yeah, now we can. So angle C is congruent to angle F. I would also add that segment AC is congruent to segment DF. Oops, I put angle. Segment AC and segment DF. And then, of course, there's a third side, right? This third side would be AB congruent to D. All right, so because the triangles were congruent by angle, angle, side, we could say all of this new information is also true. And that is by CPCTC. That's what allows us to do that. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so we're going to do 2 proofs and then we will actually be done for today. So this proof is a little weird because if you notice, it does not give you any given, right? It doesn't say given at the top. So this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. The given is actually given to us in the picture this time. So if there's something in your picture, you can also mark that in your proof. So in my proof or in my diagram, I see that AB is congruent to BC. And they actually gave me that in the picture. So I'm still going to say given. All right, and then we also have segment AD congruent to segment DC, also given. Now, next I'm going to try to find like another piece because right now I just have side, side. And so I know I'm going to need at least one more piece of information before I can show the triangle's congruent. So hopefully you see it. It's the third side that they're sharing. So segment BD is congruent to segment BD. And remember, anytime something is congruent to itself, that's the reflexive property of congruence. All right, so now I have a third side. So I do have side, side, side now. So that means I can show the triangles are congruent. So triangle, let's say ABD is congruent to triangle. All right, so I started with A, went to B, and then D. So I need to start with C, go up to B, and down to D. And they are congruent because of side, side, side. All right, the last line, we already know what it's going to be. It has to be what we're trying to prove. So angle A is congruent to angle C. Now, is that true? Let me kind of erase some of this. Is angle A congruent to angle C? Well, before we started, I would have to say no because the triangles weren't congruent, but now we know they are by side, side, side. And so are all of the pieces congruent in these triangles now? Yeah, they are. So angle A and angle C are congruent, and that's because all of the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right. Number 7, or slide number 7. We have another proof. It has a given this time written out. So let's go ahead and make sure we add that to our proof. And segment AD. All right, so remember, anytime you have something given to you, you need to make sure it's marked in the diagram. When they tell you that two triangles are right triangles, you can typically assume that the middle letter is the right angle. So angle B and angle D are the right angles, and you can also see it kind of fits in with the picture there that those are the right angles. All right, we know also that segment AD is congruent to segment CB, and I'm thinking if I have a right triangle, I remember that hypotenuse leg is typically the one we use. So can I use hypotenuse leg here? And if so, what's missing? Well, this side over here, this would be the leg, right? The hypotenuse is right here on both triangles, actually. So this segment I'm going to mark as congruent to itself by the reflexive POC. And so I actually have enough information now to show that the triangles themselves are congruent. So let's say ADC. ADC is congruent to triangle. All right, so I started with A, went to D. So I'm going to start with C, go down to B, and then A. And the reason these are congruent is the hypotenuse leg congruence theorem. All right, so we actually won't need all 6 lines here. Let's go ahead and just scratch these out. We have enough information now to show every little piece is congruent, right? Because the triangles are congruent now, everything's the same. So segment DC can now be congruent to segment AB. Because if you look up here, AB and DC, and that is because all of the corresponding parts of those triangles are congruent. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, and that is actually it for today, guys. Pretty short lesson. Make sure that you check Canvas for your homework. Again, test is coming up, so also be working on that extra credit. All right, I will see you guys soon. Make sure you message me if you have any questions.